Look, I'm going to start with the idea. I'm going to raise a question that, to me, Silicon, the Startup Bus and Startup Weekend, they find people who've got good ideas and they put them together, but you talked about 6 businesses and 38 businesses. Are they businesses or are they just ideas? When does an idea turn into a business?
Our ladies first, thank you. Oh, so kind of you. Well, initially they're all ideas, and the reason why organizations like Startup Bus and Startup Weekend exist is because the people have ideas and they want to build something, but they don't know where to start. So this is essentially a starting point for them to build a team, share that idea, and if you manage to get like-minded people on board with different skill sets, this is where it becomes a working prototype. In Startup Weekend's case, it's by the end of weekend you have to have a working prototype.
Okay.
I think it's easy to start, a lot harder to finish, and the whole point of things like Startup Bus and Startup Weekend, like Olga alludes to, is about inspiring people and getting them to sort of mimic the process of a startup, but with that really the exposure and the risk that occurs. So it's really about developing people. But I think for a startup, like you were questioning before what makes a startup, I think what makes a startup in a technology sense is a scalable startup. It's a business that's looking for a business model, and when they find that business model they start executing and growing, which is different from a traditional business. Like a startup in professional services is more of the traditional startup where they're just executing on a revenue model, and it really becomes a business when you find that business model and can execute on it, and that can take years.
It's interesting. There's an article that came out in TechCrunch that basically said balanced teams with one technical founder and one business founder generally raise 30% more money and are almost 3 times more likely to grow. And so in some ways what you're saying is if you bring together that mix of I have an understanding of a technical side and an idea and I have an understanding of a business model, that's when you have more strength. But Peter and Mike, do you think the network is critical? Is it crucial to actually making your startup work?
Absolutely. Just moving on to the point, I'm a firm believer that I guess businesses start the day you quit your job and start working on them full time. The actual day you take serious action to push your business forward is the day that it starts. As far as the network is concerned, I'm a firm believer that having other people around to coach you through this pretty daunting task, and of course the rather daunting few months that follow, is definitely extremely worthwhile.
But there's a lot of businesses that start without that network. I mean, I'd say our business started without that network. I know many of you here have got businesses that started without this sort of network hothousing idea, and yet there are, I'd say, successful startups and successful businesses that don't start inside these idea incubators or inside these network places. So clearly there's a lot of ways in which startups can happen.
Oh, without a doubt. We're not saying our way is the only way to start a business and hopefully make that business successful, but I think our way is a pretty good one.
I just no, that's a very good point. And but I think one of the things that we can get caught up in a network is the amount of what I guess is called blind data. There are so many people out there who aren't connected to the network, who would benefit from being connected to the network. Does the network improve your chances? Yes, it does. But having said that, there are just so many people that we've introduced to Fishburners who knew nothing of the community here and who wanted to get connected. And I suspect that the network that we know here as being the entrepreneurial network in Sydney is a fraction of the activity that's going on out there that isn't connected to the network. So, yeah.
It's interesting, that same TechCrunch article that I was talking about said here that solo founders, so basically people who kind of do it on their own without either the network support or without the other business people to come together, take 3.5 times longer to reach the stage of being able to scale their business. And as you said, scale is actually a critical thing. So I think it is interesting that it's often the businesses that have multiple people in them with complementary skills that seem to work. If there's anybody in the audience who wants to ask a question, just throw up your hand or throw the question at me and we'll go forward, but otherwise I'm going to keep on talking to the panel. In particular, one of the things I want to do, this is the launch of Digital Sydney. Now, it's kind of interesting. We've seen a video of your startup weekend in Auckland and we've seen your stories of Silicon Valley. What makes Sydney a great place to start a digital business? Now, we've got Fishburners, there's a good thing. But
Well, what makes Sydney great? Well, it's something I've asked myself for the last 10 years, to be honest. And but I'm starting to get an answer. And no, seriously, and that is there's something unique about it. It's real. There's something unique about the culture between people here, culture between entrepreneurs, and it's definitely, you know, you might call it the tall poppy, but the reverse side of that is wanting everyone to succeed. So it's something that I didn't find too much when I looked in the valley, and our willingness to help other people, our mates or whatever you want to call it. Yeah, that is something I've observed by looking at these guys. It's amazing to me. If we can capitalise on that and grow that, we can really differentiate ourselves and be something unique.
I think the secret to Silicon Valley are the alumni networks, people that have worked together 10 years ago and are reforming together now in businesses. And they talk about the PayPal mafia who have gone to start up, like invested in Facebook. And there's also another half dozen companies like LinkedIn that have been really high profile, all linked to the original PayPal group. And I think what the real value in the reason why Fishburne is going to transform the Sydney startup scene is because it's building that collaborative network and alumni network where people know each other and can trust each other. And so I think Sydney has a very good social scene, and just encouraging that environment actually is going to produce a more creative environment, because creative is the opposite to analytical, and to get creative you need to sort of have people supporting you and giving you these complementary ideas and sort of giving you feedback and validation to encourage you to think better.